It was supposed to be a memorable night for Emily and her college friends. A summer evening, they decided to take the last ferry to Liberty Island, eager to see the Statue of Liberty up close under the moonlight. Emily had always felt drawn to the monument, its towering presence both awe-inspiring and mysterious. But that night, something felt different, the air heavier than usual. As they disembarked from the ferry, the sound of the city faded, leaving only the soft lapping of the waves and an eerie silence. The torch of Lady Liberty glowed faintly in the distance, casting long shadows over the island. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from those shadows. She brushed off the uneasy feeling, blaming it on the late hour and the island's isolation. Her friends laughed, snapping photos and joking around as they approached the pedestal. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew through, snuffing out the soft glow of their phones and cameras. "Strange," one of her friends muttered, trying to reignite the screen. But before they could figure out what was going on, a low, guttural whisper echoed through the air. "Leave. Now." The group froze, each one of them turning to Emily with wide eyes. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her heart racing. Before anyone could answer, the whisper came again, louder this time, and more insistent. "Leave before she wakes." The ground beneath them trembled as they looked up at the statue's torch, now glowing a menacing red. Emily's breath hitched as she noticed something horrifying. The statue's face, normally stoic and expressionless, had shifted, its eyes were now looking directly at her. Without warning, the ground cracked open beneath their feet, and a chilling wind whipped through the air. The whispering grew louder, echoing all around them, as if the very island was alive with tortured souls. "We must go!" Emily screamed, grabbing her friend's arm, but it was too late. The torch's light flared, and from the statue's base, shadowy figures emerged, twisted, deformed versions of the statue's face. They moved swiftly, surrounding the group, their whispers turning to blood-curdling screams. One by one, Emily's friends were pulled into the shadows, their cries for help swallowed by the growing darkness. Emily ran as fast as she could, her legs shaking with fear, but the shadows followed her. As she neared the edge of the island, she glanced back one last time and saw it, the Statue of Liberty's face twisted in a grotesque smile, her eyes glowing with malice. Emily leaped onto the ferry just as it pulled away, the island receding into the distance. But the whispers never left her. Every night since, she could still hear them, calling her back to the island, to finish what had begun. Emily never returned to Liberty Island, but she knew that whatever was hidden beneath the statue's flame would never let her go. Moral: curiosity can lead us to uncover horrors that were never meant to be found. Sometimes, it's better to leave the mysteries of the past buried, lest they awaken something that cannot be stopped. For Jacob, a seasoned historian, the Statue of Liberty was more than just a symbol of freedom, it was a gateway to uncovering America's deepest secrets. He had spent years studying the history of the monument, poring over old documents and blueprints that hinted at something more sinister hidden within its design. Determined to uncover the truth, Jacob gained special access to the statue, convinced that its architect had left behind clues that pointed to a darker story. Late one evening, after all the tourists had left, Jacob climbed the narrow staircase to the crown, his heart pounding with excitement. The air grew colder the higher he ascended, and with each step, a strange sense of foreboding settled over him. Finally, he reached the crown and gazed out over the skyline, but something was off. The city below seemed distant, almost blurry, as if it were a mirage. Jacob turned his attention to the inside of the crown, where the statue's eyes were. They had always fascinated him, the way they seemed to stare out at the city with an unyielding gaze. But as he stepped closer, he realized something was wrong. The eyes weren't just staring, they were moving. A low creak echoed through the crown as the eyes shifted slightly, their gaze locking onto Jacob. He stumbled back, his heart racing, but the movement didn't stop. The statue's eyes blinked. A cold sweat dripped down his back as he tried to rationalize what he was seeing. It had to be a trick of the light, a malfunction in the metal. But then the whispers started. "Do you see me now?" a voice hissed, seemingly coming from the very walls of the statue. Jacob's hands trembled as he pulled out his flashlight, scanning the area for any sign of an intruder. But he was alone. The voice came again, more urgent this time. "Do you see the truth?" it asked, and Jacob felt a cold hand brush against his neck. He spun around, but there was nothing there, just the cold, empty space of the statue's crown. Desperate to leave, Jacob rushed back to the staircase, but the statue had other plans. The metal around him groaned, and the walls seemed to close in as if the statue was trying to trap him. He stumbled down the stairs, the whispers growing louder with every step. By the time he reached the base, Jacob was shaking uncontrollably. The statue's eyes were still following him, even from a distance, burning into his mind. For days after, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that the statue was watching him, even when he was miles away. He eventually left the city, abandoning his research, but the eyes of liberty never stopped haunting him. He realized too late that some secrets were meant to remain hidden. Moral: the search for truth can sometimes lead us down dark paths, where knowledge becomes a curse. Be careful what you seek, for you might find something that will haunt you forever. Few people knew that Liberty Island once housed more than just a symbol of freedom. During its early years, parts of the island were used to imprison those deemed dangerous to the New World Order, men and women whose stories were erased from history. Rachel, a documentary filmmaker, had come across old records that hinted at the existence of a secret prison beneath the Statue of Liberty. Determined to uncover the truth, she gathered her team and set out to film a documentary that would expose the forgotten prisoners of Liberty Island. The crew arrived on the island late at night, armed with cameras and recording equipment. Rachel's excitement was palpable as they ventured into the lower levels of the statue, an area rarely visited by the public. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. As they descended into the underground chambers, they stumbled upon a series of old, rusted cells. The air was thick with decay, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed through the corridors. Rachel's heart raced as she set up her camera, eager to capture footage that would change history. But as the crew began filming, something strange happened. The cameras started malfunctioning, their screens flickering with static. One by one, the lights in the room went out, plunging them into darkness. Rachel heard a faint whisper, barely audible, but unmistakable. "Why have you come here?" the voice asked, its tone cold and accusatory. Rachel's breath hitched as she scanned the room, her eyes struggling to adjust to the darkness. The rest of the crew stood frozen, their faces pale with fear. Suddenly, the sound of chains rattling filled the air, and a cold breeze swept through the chamber. Rachel's heart pounded as she turned toward the cells, her eyes widening in horror. Shadowy figures began to materialize within the cells, ghostly apparitions of the forgotten prisoners. Their faces were gaunt and hollow, their eyes filled with rage and sorrow. "Release us," one of the figures whispered, its voice echoing through the chamber. Rachel's hands shook as she backed away, but the figures began to move toward her, their chains dragging across the floor. The whispers grew louder, filling her mind with the cries of the imprisoned souls. Rachel screamed for her crew to run, but it was too late. The shadows enveloped them, their icy touch paralyzing them with fear. Rachel's vision blurred as the cold seeped into her bones. The last thing she saw before losing consciousness was the towering silhouette of the Statue of Liberty, its face twisted in silent judgment. When Rachel awoke, she was alone in the chamber, her crew nowhere to be found. The cameras were gone, the lights still flickering, as if nothing had happened. But Rachel knew the truth: the prisoners of Liberty Island had claimed their revenge, and she had barely escaped with her life. The past has a way of resurfacing when we least expect it, especially when it involves those who were wronged. Sometimes, it's best to leave the forgotten in peace, for disturbing their rest can have terrifying consequences. Curiosity and the pursuit of knowledge, while often noble, can lead to terrifying consequences when it awakens forces better left undisturbed. Each story reminds us of the dangers of unraveling dark histories and the haunting reality that some things are meant to stay in the shadows.